What about deification or theosis? The basis of the Christian teaching on deification or theosis can be found in the New Testament in Peter 1:4, where it says that we have a vocation to become partakers of the divine being, and the possibility of deification lies in the redemption of man in Jesus Christ. Deification is the conformity of the imago Dei in man to the archetype, which is Jesus Christ. Christ is the matrix of our human structure, and He is also the target of the human, of full synergy, a unity of the human with the divine in the horizon of Holy Grace, the uncreated energy that springs from the Holy Trinity. Deification does not imply that man becomes God, changing his ontological substance. Not a dissolution into the divine, as in Vedic Hinduism, in which Atman and Brahman become one, as the drop of water becomes one with the ocean, having the same substance. Man remains a different entity, human being, but a transfigured one. For these reasons, deification excludes any interpretation in an evolutionary sense. For example, Saint Maxim the Confessor used the illustration of the sword and fire to explain the nature of these hypostatic transfiguration more precisely. The iron sword set on fire does not cease to be iron, but acquires the properties of fire as it emits light and heat. What about deification? How we can achieve deification? The basis there is the image of God, imago Dei, in ourselves. Through a spiritual dynamics, we have three stages: this patience, enlightenment, and union with God. And we will achieve at the level of likeness to God, that means deification, theosis. What are the ethical challenges of transhumanism to human dignity? So I make some remarks about some critical reflections about these two perspectives. From my point of view, deification and transhumanism are radically different in the grounding of the meaning of overcoming the space-time condition. First of all, deification and transhumanism are radically different in their grounding. As I told you, theosis or deification is grounded in Christian spirituality, but transhumanism is grounded in secularist culture, which exclude any possibility of scientific references to the validity of religion. Deification is an overcoming of limited space-time frameworks, not as an act of human performance, but as a way of transfiguring the body and the soul. In transhumanism, technology alone is the source of man's transformations. His upgrading to the measure of immortality. It is based on human autonomy, the source of which can be traced back to the Enlightenment. However, transhumanism does not propose a humanism like the secular Enlightenment culture, but a kind of post-humanism. Actually, as the concept of transhumanism reflect his meaning, transhumanism means to be in transition from something to a different level, or something different. Transhumanist tendencies push the boundaries of who man is while seeking new forms of humanity. Human nature is not a static, unchanging thing, but simply a point on a pathway of development. 3-4 transhumanism goal is not the ideal human of enlightenment humanism, but something that transcends what we would currently label human. By applying technology to ourselves, we can move beyond and become something that is post-human. Mechanizations of the human being is seen as the only and necessary solution to the humanization of the machine. Absolutization of technology turns it from a tool of man into a subject, and man, human being, turns into a tool of technology. And I think these are the biggest challenges regarding the transhumanism. Also, transhumanism, which aims to a post-humanism, will come to question the meaning and legitimacy of concepts that have been worked on theological and philosophical in philosophy for hundreds and thousands of years, such as human dignity, human person, consciousness, freedom, and so on. Not least, transhumanism represents a real challenge to Western anthropology. There is no place for a soul in the techno-scientific logic of transhumanism. Man is an entity that must evolve through science, to what is very complicated to specify. Probably from Homo sapiens to Techno sapiens. So these were some few remarks about systematic, also comparative perspective regarding the Christian thinking about the deification of theosis and transhumanism. My intention is not to criticize the use of technology in our days, but it is very important for us what kind of meaning we give to technology when we use it. I use my phone because it is necessary. I communicate with my mother, with my sister, with my family, with my friends, with my students. But when I use this phone to emphasize my ego, my narcissism, if I say so, it can become problematic. So yeah, this was my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Jona. Our next speaker is Professor Pavel Dancak, University of Presov, and the title of his paper is Artificial Intelligence, Christian and particularly Catholic Tradition. Few remarks. The floor is yours, please, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Your presentation is there. Let me help you.
Yeah. Where?
It's on the screen.
Oh.
Yeah. No. Here.
Yes, but
USB is somewhere here.
To był ten USB klucz palestin z tą
Oh,
czerwoną
it is.
krwią.
It's working?
Yeah. Fine.
It should be. Yeah.
Honorable audience, dear colleagues, my topic is artificial intelligence, Christian and particularly Catholic tradition. Few remarks. Reason why for choosing this topic is that religion and especially Christian and particularly Catholic tradition many times analyze the development of nations, of people, and also now we have a new situation when technical development is very fast, and we have to think about this from our point as believers or non-believers, because this point of view is very important. People, every from us, have to make a decision about your faith, about your belief, And as Max Scheler underlined that man is only being which is able to build altar. And the Catholic Church is challenged by scientific and technological innovation, but can help to integrate, multiply voices in the ongoing dialogue regarding artificial intelligence and machine ethics. In this context, a multidisciplinary working group brought together by the Church reflected on robotics, explored the themes of embodiment, agency and intelligence. I have to interrupt my speech because now I would like to more deeply explain word term robotics, especially for Slovak guys. This word doesn't have connection with our politicians like two Roberts. They don't have ethics, you know. But it word was created by Czech writer and philosopher Čapek, robot. And now we will continue about ethics and robotics and so on. The fast pace of digital innovation and technological progress calls for profound ethical reflection. The ethical frameworks for artificial intelligence, recently proposed by private and public actors, including EJ, OECD and UNESCO, denote increasing awareness and commitment at the international level. Extended transdisciplinary discussion in scientific journals supports the enactment of such a process where it is crucial to preserve solidarity among people, as highlighted by the UN. Moreover, the need to dynamically access the impact of digital innovation and technological progress on society and the environment is receiving growing attention as an integral action that is needed for sustainable development. Further, it is necessary to discuss the contextual definition of shared principles for their common understanding to be effective and to move from guidelines to actions. The Catholic Church is proactively joining the ongoing dialogue. In his address to the 25th Anniversary General Assembly of the Pontifical Academy for Life in 2019, Pope Francis reiterated that artificial intelligence, robotics and other technological innovations must be so employed that they contribute to the service of humanity and to the protection of our common home, rather than to the contrary, as some assessments unfortunately foresee. Moreover, while underlining the qualitative distinction between machine functional automatism and the human prerogatives of knowledge and action, Pope Francis remarked that the inherent dignity of every human being must be firmly placed at the center of our reflection and action. The underlying difference between human beings and machines is a key point for the ongoing debate, which should be nurtured by integrating the reflection offered by religious denominations at large as fully participating in pluralist societies. In this light, the Catholic Church recently organized a dedicated event in the Vatican entitled Renaissance, a human-centric artificial intelligence. This event was accompanied by the signing of the Rome Call for Artificial Intelligence Ethics, a statement regarding the need for human-centric artificial intelligence ethics principles that was drafted by an interdisciplinary working group coordinated by Pontifical Academy of Life. The call was signed first by Pontifical Academy for Life, President Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia, Microsoft President Brad Smith, IBM's Executive Vice President John Kelly III, and Director General Dan Greenwood, and the Minister of Italian Government for Technological Innovation and Digitalization, Paola Pisano. In his message to Pontifical Academy for Life's General Assembly, concurrent with the Rome call for ethics, Pope Francis recalled how digital innovation affects our way of understanding the world and ourselves, being increasingly present in human activity and even in human decisions, and thus altering the way we think and act. Pope Francis also noted the quest for a broader education effort by indicating that it is not enough simply to trust in the moral sense of researchers and developers of devices and algorithms. There is a need to create intermediate social bodies that can incorporate and express the ethical sensibilities of users and educators. And Pope Francis urges to promote an education that aims not only to acquire technical skills, but also to understand the responsibilities involved in the development, deployment, and use of technologies in order to make a demanding choice even against one's immediate interest, based on solid forward-looking motivation and discernment. For such an educational effort to effectively permeate society and steer the digital innovation, it is necessary to also foster organization, including non-government organizations, professional associations, cultural and social movements, and foundations, able to effectively represent and convey the multifaceted expression of users and citizens at large to developers and decision makers. With highlighting the dangers also associated with information asymmetry. Pope Francis remarked that these dangers must not detract from the immense potential that the new technologies offer. We find ourselves before a gift from God, a resource that can bear good fruits. The Pontifical Academy for Life strives to interweave faith and science technology so as to identify paths for multiple voices to respectfully walk alongside one another. Indeed, Pontifical Academy for Life's objective is the defense and promotion of the value of human life and on the dignity of the person, and the study of ethical, cultural and social aspects of scientific and technological progress is integral to its mission. To support its mission in relation to topics of great interest such as robotics and artificial intelligence, Pontifical Academy for Life established a working group on robotics. Such a working group gathered experts from different disciplines, including natural, social and applied sciences, philosophy and theology. and countries representing Africa, Asia, Europe, America, and Australia, who are called to enter the complex ongoing debate and help identity, moral values, and criteria of discernment for the good of all human beings, based on meetings held during two recent Pontifical Academy for Life workshops and additional interactions. The working group reflected on embodiment, agency and intelligence, in particular in relation to the difference between human beings and machines, in order to bring a complementary contribution to the ongoing discussion on artificial systems. Current research in robotics leverage the concept of embodied intelligence, sometimes called material intelligence, based on the fact that the robot bodies in terms of structure and material properties can absorb or negotiate some of the challenges of interacting with the environment. This benefits on robot control as well. According to Christian anthropology, human beings were bodily created by God in His image and likeness. Human beings not only have a body, but also are body in a space-time dimension. As an incarnate spirit, the human body encompasses the place of living experience as recognized by Pope Francis in the encyclical letter Laudato Si. Our body itself establishes us in a direct relationship with the environment and with other living beings. The indivisibility of soul and human body, just recalled from Christian anthropology, also find correspondence in the idea of embodiment at the base of contemporary theory within development science, for which the human body is a three-dimensional entity: biological, body as a form; psychological, body as a lived experience; and socio-cultural, body actively engaged with the world. When pushing the research frontier by investigating artificial intelligence methods for embodying a specific behavior in biological entities, or the use of invasive devices that do not just read out but also stimulate body activity, the non-reducibility of a human being to their constituent part should be kept at the center of our reflection and action. Christian anthropology also fosters the debate on machine agency. In Christian ethics, moral agency is grounded on free action and deliberate decisions taken in conscience. Human beings were created with consciousness and free will, able to also form interpersonal relationship, being aware of the presence of other persons by recognizing their consciences and free will. Although machines can relate to other entities, human beings have the distinctive capacity to question the criteria and principles upon which they make decisions, being capable of critical self-reflection and ethical decision-making. Interesting intentionality, hence moral agency, can those be strictly ascribed to human beings, although also machine behavior resulting from the underlying programming can be positively assessed when subjected to moral judgment. Similarly, and despite its widespread use in relation to machines, autonomy in the ethically relevant sense can only be attributed to human beings due to the underlying cognitive process entailing self-awareness, self-consciousness and self-authorship according to reasons and values, closely and preeminently identified with the dignity of human person and human agency. Development signs point to human agency by also highlighting how individuals are part of a self-constructing dynamic system of human life and development for which agency and self-construction also entail responsibility. Christian anthropology articulates a vision of human beings called to cultivate, develop and increase creation, establishing a future-oriented ethics open to and responsible for development. Such ethics promotes an attitude towards science and technology that is fundamentally confident and welcoming of innovation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Your time is
Over, yes.
over.
Yes.
Maybe you can. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Granca. And our last speaker in this session is Professor Jan Zozulak, University of Constantine, the philosopher in Nitra. And the title of his paper is The Problematic of Transhumanism Through the Prism of Byzantine Anthropology. Please, Professor, the floor is yours.
Vážení prítomní, otázky súvisiace s transhumanizmom sú v súčasnej dobe veľmi aktuálne a rýchly vedecko-technický pokrok človeku nedáva veľa priestoru na to, aby si uvedomil dôsledky čoraz rýchlejšie meniaceho sa sveta, plného najmodernejších technológií. Na každom kroku sa stretávame s technologickými vylepšaniami a najnovšie novinky digitálneho sveta často príjmame automaticky a bez kritického postoja. Zvykli sme si na počítače, mobilné telefóny, internet a sociálne siete, ale možno si neuvedomujeme, ako radikálne sa za posledných 30 rokov zmenil náš osobný a spoločenský život.
Dear colleagues, the questions connected to transhumanism are currently quite actual, up to date, and we observe the very fast scientific or technical progress, not giving much space to humans to actually realize the consequences of the changing world, changing too fast, but full of modern technologies. We are meeting technological progress and improvements every day, but oftentimes we accept it without critical remarks, sort of automatically. And we are used to computers, cell phones, internet, social networks, but we maybe do not realize how radically the world was changed, and including our personal and societal life in the last 30 years.
Ďakujem organizátorom tejto konferencie za pozvanie a návrh prezentovať túto problematiku cez prízmu byzantskej antropológie a zamyslieť sa nad dôsledkami transhumanizmu pre chápanie ľudskej dôstojnosti a práv. V spektre súčasných trendov sa táto téma javí ako veľmi aktuálna a možno až provokujúca, pretože komparácia pozitívnych a negatívnych dôsledkov skúmania akejkoľvek problematiky nepochybne prináša zástancov a odporcov nejakého prístupu či riešenia problematiky. Chcel by som preto len načrtnúť niektoré aspekty byzantského chápania antropologických otázok a priviesť účastníkov konferencie k zamysleniu nad hĺbším rozberom tejto problematiky, ktorá úzko súvisí so zdokonaľovaním človeka podľa Božieho obrazu a podoby. V opačnej perspektíve človek namiesto toho, aby sa snažil stať podobným Božiemu obrazu a podobe, snaží sa vytvoriť bytie na svoj obraz a podobu.
I would like to thank the organizers of this conference for invitation and suggestion to present these problematics through the prism of Byzantine anthropology, to think about the consequences of transhumanism for the understanding of human dignity and human rights. So in the specter of current trends, this topic is very actual, maybe even provoking, because when we compare the positive and negative consequences of the research of this problematic, we find those who are for, but also those who are against any kind of attempt to solve these problematics. I would like to point out some of the aspects of Byzantine understanding of anthropological questions, and I would like to lead all of us to think more deeply about the deep dimension of this problematics, which is closely connected with the improvement of human being according to the image of God. The other perspective, or the opposite perspective, speaks about the human being who, instead of striving to be similar to the image of God, creates the being according to their own perspective and image.
Veda môže skúmať hmotu, z ktorej bol stvorený človek, ale žiaden vedec nemôže s objektívnou vedeckou presnosťou podrobne skúmať originál, na základe ktorého bol stvorený človek, pretože tento originál je ontologickým obsahom Božieho obrazu. To znamená, že ontologická pravda o človeku sa nenachádza v jeho prirodzených vlastnostiach, ako tvrdia materialistické teórie, ani v duši alebo vyššej časti duše, v mysli, ako sa domnievali antickí filozofi, ale v origináli. Ako pravda o obraze sa nachádza v zobrazenej osobe, rovnako tak aj pravda o človeku sa nachádza v jeho origináli. Ako pravda a možnosti hmotného stvorenia sa zjavujú a uskutočňujú v človeku, rovnako tak pravda a možnosti stvoreného človeka sa zjavujú a uskutočňujú v nestvorenom Bohu. Z toho je zrejmé, že dôvod, pre ktorý človek zostáva a zostane tajomstvom pre vedu, je fakt, že sa nachádza za hranicami vedy.
Science can research the matter from which the human being was created, but there is no scientist who can objectively, scientifically, exactly in detail research the original on the basis of which the human being was created, because this very original is the ontological substance of the image of God. That's why the ontological truth about human being is not found in their natural proprieties, as the materialist theories would say, nor in the soul, all the higher part of the soul, in the mind, as the antique philosophers would say, but in their original. As the truth about the image is shown in the person, the same way the truth about human being is shown only in its original, his original. So as the truth and the possibilities of the creation is revealed and executed in human being, in the same way the truth and the possibilities of created human are revealed and executed in uncreated God, God who was not created. So it is very clear that the reason for which the human being remains the mystery for science is the fact that the human being is beyond the borders of science.
Keď je človek obrazom, jeho skutočné bytie sa neohraničuje stvorenou zložkou, ktorou je stvorený obraz, ale nestvoreným originálom. To znamená, že keď bol človek stvorený podľa obrazu nekonečného Boha, je už od svojej prirodzenosti volaný k prekročeniu uzavretých medzníkov stvorenia a a dôjsť k večnosti, ktorá nemá koniec. Tu logicky vyvstáva otázka, čo znamená originál archetyp. Pre byzantských mysliteľov, podľa ktorých je Kristus originálom, archetypom človeka, má odpoveď na túto otázku rozhodujúci význam, čo potvrdzuje text Nikolaja Kavasila, ktorý je podobný textu Gregora Nyského a zároveň ho vysvetľuje. Citujem. Ľudská prirodzenosť bola od začiatku stvorená pre nového človeka Krista. Pre neho bola stvorená aj myseľ a túžba. Dostali sme rozum, aby sme poznali Krista, dostali sme túžbu, aby sme utekali k nemu. Máme pamäť, aby sme na neho pamätali, pretože keď sme boli stvorení, on bol originálom, archetypom. Nie starý Adam bol vzorom pre nového, ale nový bol vzorom pre starého. A keď sa uvádza, že nový Adam sa podobal na starého, hovorí sa to vo vzťahu k rozkladu, ktorý ako prvý vniesol prvý stvorený človek a zdedil ho Kristus, aby uzdravujúcimi prostriedkami, ktoré mal, uzdravil chorobu ľudskej prirodzenosti, aby život zničil smrť, aby život zvíťazil nad smrťou, ako hovorí apoštol Pavol.
So, if the human being, if a man is an image, his true being is not bound by the created part, the created image, but the uncreated original. It means that if a human being was created according to the image or in the image of infinite God, from their very nature is called to go over the closed landmarks of creation and come to eternity without any end. So logically we have a question, what does it mean to be the original, the archetype? According to the Byzantine thinkers, according to whom Christ is the original, the archetype of human being, the answer to this question is of crucial importance, also supported by the text of Nikolai Kavasilos, which is similar to the text of Gregory of Nyssa. So, I quote, "The human nature was from the very beginning created for the new person, new human being, Christ. For him, the mind and desire was also created. We were given the reason to know Christ. We were given the desire to run to him. We were given the memory to remember him. Because when we were created, he, meaning the Christ, was the original archetype. Not the old Adam was the paradigm for the new, but the new Adam was the paradigm for the old. So when we speak about the fact that the new Adam was similar to the old one, it speaks about the subject in relation to this integration, which was brought about with the first created human being, and Christ inherited it, so that he, with his healing means that he owned, can heal the sickness of human nature, so that the life can destroy death, and so that the life can be victorious over the death, just as the Apostle Paul says.
Originál, archetyp človeka nie je len logos, ale vtelený logos, ako to vystihol Nikolaj Kavasilas na inom mieste. Človek kvôli prirodzenosti, vôli a mysli smeruje ku Kristovi, a to nielen preto, že Kristus je Boh a teda konečným cieľom všetkého, ale preto, že je aj človekom. Podľa byzantských autorov nie je dôležité, že Kristus neexistoval historicky počas stvorenia prvého človeka. Základné biblické učenie sa opiera o fakt, že Kristus v nadčasovej Božej realite je pred všetkým. Keď človek, pre ktorého bolo stvorené celé hmotné stvorenie, posledný zo všetkého stvorenia, zišiel zo zeme, je logické, že Kristus, ktorý je cieľom celého hmotného a duchovného stvorenia, je neskorší ako Adam, pretože všetky veci z nedokonalí vedú k dokonalosti. Je pochopiteľné, že Kristus ako najvyššia realizácia človeka tvorí koniec výstupu ľudstva, začiatok a koniec histórie.
So the original, the archetype of human being is not only the Logos, but the Logos incarnate, as Nikolais Kavasilos says on another place. Human being, because of its nature, will and mind, is focused and goes to Christ, not only because Christ is God, but therefore the final goal of all, but because Christ at the same time is human being. So according to Byzantine authors, it is not important that Christ was non-existent in body during the creation of first human being. The basic biblical teaching focuses on the fact that Christ, in God's reality above all time, is before everything. When the human being, for whom the whole material creation was made, was the last of all creation, coming out from the earth, being created from the mud, it is logical that Christ, who is the goal of all material but also spiritual creation, is the later Adam, or Adam that comes later, because all things go from being imperfect to perfection. It is understandable that Christ, as the highest realization of human being, is the end of humanity. He is the beginning and the end of the history.
Boží obraz sa týka celého človeka ako jedinečnej osoby, ktorá zahŕňa celú prirodzenosť. Pretože k životu bol povolaný celý človek. Aby sa v ňom plne odrážal Boh a aby bol účastný na živote trojediného Boha. Človek by v sebe nemohol odrážať Boha, ak by nemal možnosť stať sa podobným Bohu, teda ak by nebol stvorený aj podľa Božej podoby. To znamená, ak by nebol povolaný od svojho stvorenia stať sa podobným Bohu cez spoluprácu, synergiu svojej slobodnej vôle s Božou blahodaťou alebo milosťou. Človek bol stvorený a povolaný stať sa podobným Bohu, stať sa Bohom, ale s malým B. Práve v tomto dynamickom naplnení ľudského cieľa spočíva plnosť realizácie života človeka podľa Božieho obrazu a podoby.
God's image composes, or God's image is about the whole human being. And the whole human being means a unique person, including the nature, because through life, a human being was called to show God in fullness, to participate on the life of triune God. So, if the human being, if the human being cannot reflect God, there would be no possibility for the human being to be similar to God. So, if the human being was not creating according to the image of God, it means human being was not called from his creation to be similar to God through synergy, through cooperation of their free will with God's grace. So the human being was created and called to become similar to God, to become God, but not with a capital G, but with a small g. In this dynamic connection, the human goal will be fulfilled in full realization of life of human being according to God's image.
Stvorenie človeka podľa Božieho obrazu sa týka predovšetkým stvorenia celého človeka ako živej osoby a všetkých ľudí ako živých osôb podľa obrazu trojediného Boha, pretože, ako hovorí Gregor Nysky, obraz nie je v jednej časti prirodzenosti. Každý obraz je podobný originálu a v prípade človeka originálom je Boh, ktorý je plnosťou blah. To znamená, že človek je Božím obrazom presne v tom, že je obdarovaný všetkými blahami, čo potvrdzuje Gregor Nysky nasledujúcimi slovami. Človek bol stvorený podľa Božieho obrazu, lebo to je to isté, ako keby povedal, že učinil ľudskú prirodzenosť účastičkou na každom dobre. To znamená, že ak Božie je plnosťou dobra, ktorého je človek obrazom, potom je obraz podobný originálu v tom, že je naplnený každým dobrom.
Creation of human being according to the God's image is before everything the creation of the whole human being as a person who is alive, and all the human beings as the alive beings according to the image of the triune God. Because as the Gregory of Nyssa says, the image is not partially a part of the nature. Each image is similar to the original. In this case, for human being, the original is God. And the God is the fullness of all the graces. That means that if human being bears the image of God, it's in the sense that he is gifted with all the graces. Just as Gregory of Nyssa says, human being was created according to the image of God. It is the same as if we said that the human nature participates in each good or each grace. That means that if the God's fullness of goodness and the image of God, image of human being, this is a portion of it, then the image is similar to the original because it is filled with every goodness.
Z toho vyplýva, že obraz je zložená a úplná sila, ktorou bol človek obdarovaný, aby bol slobodný, panujúci a tvorivý podobne ako Boh, ale na inej úrovni. Človek je stvorený, Boh je nestvorený. Z etického pohľadu z toho plynú nasledujúce konsekvencie. Keď Boh je slobodný vo svojom konaní, slobodný je aj človek. Keď Boh panuje hore v nebesiach, aj človek panuje dole na zemi. Keď Boh tvorí z ničoho, aj človek tvorí z existujúcej hmoty.
So from this quote, we have an image. The image speaks about the power with which the human being was gifted, so that he could be free, ruling, and creative, just as God is. But it's on another level, because the human being was created. God was not created. God is an uncreated being. So from the ethical viewpoint, we have the following consequences. If God is free in his action, the human being is free. If God rules over the heavens, in the same way, human being rules down on the earth. If God creates out of nothing, so does the human being create out of existing matter.
A celkom na záver, aby som nezneužíval svoj čas.
So to conclude, not abusing more time for you.
Myslím, že tá moja len veľmi krátka úvaha v spojení s prednáškou do kolegyne Bravena z Prahy a kolegom Durom doplňa celú tú problematiku v jednom kontexte.
I would like to point out that my short presentation in connection to what Dr. Bravena said in the morning, and then this afternoon Johan Dura also complements in a way their presentations.
A ja by som len takú poslednú, možno zložitú vec poviem, ale je to v podstate základný princíp kresťanskej dogmatiky alebo učenia.
So I will point out the very last thought. It may be a bit more complicated, but it's like the foundational principle of Christian dogmatics.
V kresťanskej dogmatike všetko začína z rozlíšenia medzi nestvoreným Bohom a stvoreným svetom.
In Christian dogmatics, the very beginning of the teaching starts with God who is uncreated and the human being who is created.
A v rámci toho stvoreného je aj človek.
So in the realm of creation that was created, a part of it is also a human being.
A do tejto kategórie spadá jazyk človeka,
So in this category, we can speak about the language, the ability to speak,
schopnosti človeka tvoriť,
the ability of human being to create, be creative.
Samozrejme, že veda je súčasťou toho.
Of course, science is a part of it,
To znamená, človek má rozum, aby rozmýšľal,
which means we were given the brain to think,
aby používal všetky možnosti, všetky technológie, všetky dostupné veci pre prospech človeka.
to use all the possibilities, all technologies for the goodness, for the good for humankind.
Ale v konečnom dôsledku všetká snaha a schopnosti človeka končia v jednej rovine,
But ultimately, all these abilities of human being end at some level
ktorú nedokáže prekonať,
that cannot be overcome
pretože tam už je nestvorená realita a to je Boh.
because it's a realm of uncreated reality, and this uncreated reality is God Himself.
Čiže človek môže sa stať podobný Bohu, ale nie Boh.
So the human being can become similar in the image of God, but never can be become the God Himself.
To znamená, že kresťanstvo vníma technológiu pozitívne, pokiaľ je to na úžitok človeka,
Christianity understands technology in a positive way if it serves to enhance the human realm.
ale ak to má iné ciele, vtedy už je to na uvaženie, pretože tam začína nebezpečenstvo.
But if the goal of technologies is different, it's like a point to stop and think, because the consequences may be major, and for us it's like a point where we should stop and reflect what's really happening.
Ďakujem za pozornosť.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Now we have time for discussion. I also invite Professor Dong and Professor Hai to discussion and you to ask questions about their papers. So we can now discussion about papers of Jura, Ranzak, Zozulak, and before Dong and Hai. Please.
If I may start, going back to the first two papers by Professor Dong and Hai. Thank you both for insightful papers. I really enjoyed listening to you. Professor Dong, I have two short comments and maybe a question. I think you quite insightfully reminded us that the difference between animals and humans is minimal on the biological level. It is more about education, culture, the way we act. And we can lose our humanity if we act against some good principles. Yeah? If we act like we are beasts, then we may become beasts in a way. So I think that's quite useful to be reminded of this. The question that emerges in this connection, however, and that's a critical question, is what about mentally sick people? Or what about people, what about children who are not yet developed culturally, are not educated, are less than 1 year old, let's say? Because according to this measure, then we could not speak of them as fully human. So that's one. I really liked your emphasis on compassion and empathy. And then the sentence that you said, as long as it is safe, any technical measures can be applied to humans. again, that you distilled the teaching of Confucianism when it comes to using technology. So again, here I agree with you, but of course the question is, how do we know it is safe, right? It's not always to predict whether a certain use of technology is safe. So I think this sentence is true. As long as it is safe, any technical measures can be applied, but how widely do we understand safety? What does it mean to be safe? I think maybe more philosophical discussion, also based on Confucianism, needs to take place on this. What does it mean to be safe? What kind of actions are safe? And if I may, Professor Hai, this is an experiment in my thoughts, but again, I liked your presentation as overall, and your emphasis when you talked about suffering and the liberation from suffering, and you distinguished between three types of suffering. You spoke of physical, mental, and then ignorance or illusion as forms of suffering. I would like to propose to you and open a debate about another very distinct kind of suffering, and this goes back to Professor Zhalet's and his presentation. I think it's connected, and it is spiritual suffering. Spiritual suffering in the sense of a crisis of meaning. You know, a crisis of meaning. Meaninglessness. Because it's not mental suffering. Yeah? And I don't think you can hide it under ignorance or illusion. It's a different way of understanding. You know, it's a different phenomenon to be ignorant or to live in an illusion. But to experience an acute sense of meaninglessness, that's huge suffering, and I would call it, it's a separate category of suffering. It's a spiritual suffering. It doesn't have to be connected with religion, but simply with some notion of transcendence of my life. My life needs to aim at something, it has to have a meaning. And if I don't see this meaning, it leads me into immense existential suffering. And I think you are omitting this aspect. Maybe we could talk about this. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your questions, and please.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. Confucianism focuses first on the intellectual, not everybody, but we can use for everybody. So your question is, for example, maturity, or we don't have enough clearing mind or ability to recognize or to do something. So what happened? If you don't have free will, you don't have any responsibility. If you don't choose, for example, transhumanism, if we make a robot, they listen to us, so they don't have any responsibility for themselves. And the human beings and animals, the different, it's not the similarity between the animal and human being, but the different. And that difference is very small. And that small is the recognized on ethics decision. On ethics. But if we maturity or we don't have ability to do that, I don't have any ethics responsibility. For example, in Christian, we talk about God loves us and we have to obey, or have to obey, obedience, and we have to do what God asks us to do. For example, treat everybody like brother and sister. But if we don't have that ability, so can I go to the heaven? Or because just I am sick, I just lying on the bed, I can't do anything, I can't do good thing for the other. So may I have go to hell? that is not the question for that kind of people. Or the other example, for example, Saint Augustine,
Yeah.
when he realized that in the desert there is a very old man, he very pure spirit, and he do everything just for himself. He can do anything for the other, for expand the God idea, but he still a saint, and just for himself. He decided for himself, but not for the outside, for everybody. So the Confucianism, just like within our heart, our mind, we just listen to the inner voice. That's enough. That's enough. Yeah. And the second question is a very difficult question. I just talk about the responsibility of Confucianism. Can we give answer to what is safe, or more than it's what is good and what is evil? It's more important than safe or not safe for him.
Okay. So spiritual suffering, maybe that's one, gap in the things that are presented. Yeah. I do not want to go into a reductionism when I try to everything complex system to simple things. But for me, it's just in the way we divide things: physical, mental, and ignorance mean that because today we talking, most of us focus on what is human nature, which is how we define what is our value of human, and then transhumanism, if we can enhance. So what kind of enhancement? So I just want to tell you about a very interesting point that recently I found out. You see that in each cell of our human being, so if you take the DNA out of the human DNA, you stretch it out. So it's about a little bit higher than 1 meter. And the width is about 2 nanometers. And if we multiply it to your human hair, which is about 20 micrometers, it means the increase 10,000 times. So it means that you can have a very long hair with about 10 kilometers. With the hairs, 10 kilometers. And that one is the Bible of all the things that we call human. Okay, in that one, that long hair, there is a very small fraction that encode like the words that will express to protein to our feature that present like I have a black hair and you have a white hair and you have a brown hair. Okay, all those things, all the letters, the amount of the basis is only 1.52% of those 10 kilometers, and the rest is almost, now people find out that it's not 98%, but around 80%, which is meaningless. It's nothing there. For now, people don't know what is the function of those things to take too much material in our DNA. But this doesn't play anything. Okay, it's for human person. For many other animals and plants, many plants is parasite like fungi and mushroom. They're parasite plants, and there's someone is the corpse plant, fungi. You see, there's a very meaningless gene there. It's take about 60% of the total DNA. So what I want to emphasize here that, okay, when we say about human nature, we just look from outside, like a macroscopic point of view. And what is inside? I mean that the characteristic of human being, somewhere, okay, mostly many part of the human nature come from the interaction, society of the society. But many of them come from inside, it means from gene. And whereas only very small fraction of gene is displayed or expressed to our features outside. So, what does it mean the human nature, human feature here? So, it's, what I want to say that it's a very big amount of something inside us we don't know. For now, I'm sure that we don't know. So that's why we say that, okay, what we see is just, very little about that. And it's a larger amount of that. So, and I have some some research about what we want, what the human being wants. And in fact, not only the consciousness, but also the consciousness, unconsciousness, we don't know. And even our consciousness is controlled by other things, but we don't know about. We just think, okay, because there are many experiments to say that, okay, they have some magnetic field that are acting on the two hemisphere, and but of course they do not. The scientists do not know, do not let the volunteer people know. But when they try to decide something, but they completely think that they have a free will to do, but in fact it's manipulated by other people, but they don't know about it. And they think that okay, it's because of that. So, okay, what you say about spiritual things? Maybe for me, I think I can say, I'm not exactly understand what you mean about spiritual suffering. Maybe it can come to the mental suffering, or part of that is related to ignorance. My ignorance, I mean, that is not because of we are just don't know. Because there are so many things that we don't know. And even when you know, we don't know how to escape from that. It's what I want to say. Because, okay, if every time I have a lot of information to present to you, that we in fact manipulate by other people. We are manipulated by other creatures, even viruses. For example, in the COVID-2, for example, and I can say that that's reported in Nature journal, and from 70 to 80% of people who got the virus, and they become overweight, obesity, I mean. But why is obesity? Okay, after I got the virus, and I just feel that I eat for the cake. I feel very good one, and I have to feel will to eat it or not. But in fact, the virus, they prefer to stay in the cholesterol, in the meat, in the fat. That created my problem. So partly that the virus controlled our consciousness, but we don't know about it. We just think that it's our will to do that, to eat the cake. The cake is very sweet for me, but in fact I will control by the other animal. Very small one, sometimes very small one like a virus, they do not have consciousness by itself. So I mean, the ignorance here is not just stupid thing, but sometimes deeply inside that controlled not only by the virus, but also by our conscious controlled by DNA also. What I say is talking about the amylase protein enzyme that we eat, stock like rice and etc. When you eat rice and wheat, you feel sweet in your mouth. Oh, it's come from very simple thing. It's a virus gene is embedded in our gene, and that gene is expressed our ability to create amylase enzyme in your mouth. So all those things, how can I say about that? You see, 8% of the total DNA basis come from viruses in the history of human being up to now. So viruses implanted in our DNA, 8%. When there are only 1.5 to 2%, it is spread to macroscopic feature. So what did you say that? Okay, what did you say about spiritual? Maybe I can apply it to mental or maybe ignorance. Maybe I'm not sure about that.
I'm not sure about that. But I grant you the ambiguity, obviously, you're right on the ambiguity. But I would still argue that it's a general experience of humanity that we are driven by an acute sense of search for meaning,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And you and I spoke much about the fact that we cannot reduce the consciousness to any of these biological, chemical, or electric categories. They help us understand how it works, but they don't explain fully what consciousness is.
Yeah, it's a hard problem.
So it's a very hard problem. So within this huge field of understanding consciousness and human agency, the quest for meaning is foundational, is fundamental. So maybe Kierkegaard could help us here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because Kierkegaard would include your category of ignorance, you know?
Spiritual suffering.
It's spiritual suffering, but we will divide the spiritual suffering into an unknown spiritual suffering, but I don't even know that I am in trouble,
Yeah,
that I'm alienated. And then the more acute one is when I know.
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's anxiety.
Anxiety.
It's covered by
Anxiety and despair.
Yeah. And human being is such anxious because he is forced, he is faced with different options, and he cannot know which option is better or worse. And this is not just the option like a rabbit who must choose to escape the tiger, to choose the way A or B or C, etc. But I don't know which form of life, which existential way is better for me. And this brings the anxiety. And the anxiety is a source of this existential suffering. And if you cannot cope with this ignorance, you are suffering a lot. You are never totally cured, but you must learn how, to put it in Christian terms, to bear with joy this yoke, this burden of suffering. So it's not the way that you eliminate suffering, because as a human being, elimination of anxiety means elimination of your anxiety, of your humanity. This is the point. If we would eliminate anxiety, we would start being human beings. It means dehumanization. For instance, historical examples. Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno are two German philosophers, Frankfurt School, Professor knows this stuff. Yeah, and they have written a very well-known book, Dialectic of Enlightenment. It's classic. Classic. And in this book, they said that the aim of enlightenment was to eliminate anxiety. And the way that extreme representatives of enlightenment tried to eliminate anxiety was to eliminate transcendence. Because anxiety originates in transcendence. Because we are a reality, transcendence also epistemologically. Not just in other things, but also epistemologically. So the only way is to eliminate source of transcendence. But the historical result, according to their thesis, was the massive suffering, because the dialectic of history brought the totalitarian Nazism and the industry of that. So to put it short, the source of our existential suffering and burden is the anxiety. And the source of this anxiety is our ignorance, which option is better, existentially better. And we cannot eliminate this suffering without eliminating our humanity. So we need anxiety to be human being. We need suffering to be human being. And this is dehumanization. The elimination of suffering, elimination of anxiety means dehumanization. You must learn, the way is to learn how to bear the yoke of suffering with joy. And this the example for this, for us Christians, is Jesus Christ.
Okay. I just very short comment that the main idea of Buddhism is not give off or cut off suffering. We, as you say, we have accepted that fact, and it's a law of nature. So when you accept it, so there's no suffering anymore. So it's also the same idea.
It's the same. You suffer with joy. Would you agree with this formulation? You somehow suffer with joy.
Yeah, but there are many, I can say that the middle backward, it means that there are many meaning about the middle backward. Sometimes it's too much, too extreme, so we should avoid the extreme. For example, I just presented many times about the physical pain, for example. And the brain, sometimes you actually have a pain at the definition of international association study of pain. They have a definition, correct definition of pain, physical pain. And but you see that the pain is related to the tissue damage. So whenever you have tissue damage, you have a pain. And when you don't have tissue damage, you don't have pain. So, but in our brain explained to us that in many cases it's not true. So that no pain, is still have a pain. So chronic pain is one of the pain example. Chronic pain is you don't have any damage, but the brain explained to our consciousness that you have pain there. Or sometimes, yeah, and sometimes there's okay for the people who don't already lost their legs and limbs, they go for the phantom limb pain.
Yeah.
So no pain at all. But it always tells us that there's a pain there.
But we have free will. Maybe I could comment just this you said about this. We have viruses and we don't know viruses, and they are causing. But if you take, for example, the Libet's experiment of free will, they prove that our free will consists not of choosing, but of the capability of resisting. You are capable of resist. You cannot influence what jumps from your body or from the ocean of your mind to your awareness. But you have a capability to resist. This is very important. This is somehow analogous to this. You don't have capability to eliminate suffering, but you are free to some degree how to cope with suffering.
Yes.
So you are not free to choose the options, but how to cope with the tyranny of the choice and with the option you choose. And in this sense, we are like, this is. I think Jonas has a question. Sorry.
Yeah, I think your question, Professor Mikal, open a very complex discussions here. Some of them in this room are Christians who have a background, think the things in a Christian way. We think regarding anthropology, that man, the structure of man is body and soul. But if we move in Buddhism or in Hinduism, for example, is a different perspective regarding anthropology. I think in Buddhism we cannot find the concept of soul or the body. It's something different. Man is something different. Human being is something. Is total. It's a radical difference between how Western world think about human nature and how Eastern world thinks about human nature. What we understand through ignorance from our perspective, from Western part, is not how the Eastern world understands ignorance. For example, in Hinduism, ignorance, avidya, the Sanskrit term, means to live in a world that is not real. Also in Buddhism, I think in Madhyamika philosophy. Yeah, nothing is real. If I see this bottle of water, in fact, this bottle of water is not real. The table is not real. Sorry?
Like snake is a rope.
Yes, like the snake in the rope. When I touch the rope in the room and there is no light in the room, my fear think that, oh, it's a snake. But when I open the light, I see the things in their true nature. So from a Eastern perspective, ignorance is not meaning that we don't know something. It's more the concept. And I think the major problem for Europe, for Western part, is that we try to find some concepts, some correspondence in words to translate some concepts from Hinduism or Buddhism or Confucianism. And I think it is wrong. I think we are thinking different way. And this is very good to think a different way. Suffering in Buddhism, for example, is not that kind of spiritual suffering, because in Buddhism or in Buddhism, there is no idea of transcendence. Nirvana is not the equivalent of the Eden or heaven. It's something different. Targata also, it not means that transcendence of God in Christianity. So I think, yeah, this is very, very complex debate, and I appreciate your answer, because I don't understand what you refer regarding the spiritual suffering. Because it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Dukkha in the dukkha, if I'm right, in Buddhism is something different, like how the Western world understands suffering. It's a more complex suffering. Non-action in Taoism, for example, means not have a free choice to choose, or in Hinduism, you have the freedom to choose something in your life. No, you don't have. You are something in the process of life. Yeah, as the chariot is a chariot when the horse is with the, I don't know the English term, with the chariot. I think this is the definition of human being in Buddhism. The man, the human being in Buddhism is not soul and body. It's something else. It's just a, structural component.
5 skandhas.
Yeah, five. Yeah, it's a very complex problem, and there was some. I think there was some misunderstanding when, for example, Max Müller translate some holy scripture from Hinduism. He translate Atman, to the concept of soul. It is wrong. It is wrong. Sorry.
Soul or self.
Yeah. It is. Atman is not the soul. It's something else. It's a different way to think in a religious and also in a philosophical way the things. And I think this is the difference between Eastern world and Western world. But
You're right. I'm glad you pointed out that this complexity and this difficulty. I'm glad you pointed it out. But still, psychologically speaking, and this is not just psychologists in the West or in the East, this is globally, the psychological society. The category of meaning you are. It doesn't matter if you are East or West.
I agree with you totally.
Existentially, you can be a Buddhist, a Christian, a Hindu, a materialist, but the category of meaning is foundational
course.
So when I introduced the category of spiritual suffering, I'm referring to the category of meaning, not to some transcendence in
I
Christian
see.
terms, or,
Yeah.
okay?
Yes,
But
yeah.
spiritual in terms of search for meaning.
It's for me.
That's spiritual, search for meaning. And this is the same for an atheist, for a Christian, on a psychological level.
Yeah.
We are searching for meaning,
Yeah.
okay? Now, of course, a Christian will then have a different path, or will understand it, from
Yeah.
maybe on different levels, but psychologically, I mean, we all need, if we live in a meaningless reality, or if I lose a sense of meaning, then, I succumb to nihilism, and why should I live?
Yeah.
And even more, I would add, it's not so relativistic,
Mhm.
because despite, like for instance, Martha Nussbaum pointed out, Martha Nussbaum is very familiar with India philosophy. She spent a lot of time in India, and her husband, Amartya Sen, is Indian, and so she knows what he's speaking about Eastern
Yeah.
and Indian spirituality and religion. But Martha Nussbaum, for instance, her position is that, of course, we must be particularly sensitive, of course. But despite all the differences, there are some common features of human conditions. So every man can feel the pain, physical pain. Every man can feel the violence of his dignity. Every man should die. Every man could become ill. These are the common features of every human conditions. And every human being must find some response, some answer to this. And responses are different. Christian, Buddhistic, and different Buddhism, different Christianity, different, they are not monolithic.
Yeah.
But the condition, there are some common points of our conditions. So every human being must respond to the question of the meaning of his life. Of course, you can have a Buddhist response, or Confucian, and even different ways of Buddhism or Confucian, but this is the point. So these are two different questions that we have different cultures, and you can incommensurability of cultures and discourses, but the common point for discussion is obvious. This is from Greece, and this is our point that we are discussing. How to point with existential suffering, and the symptom of this suffering is crisis of meaning. This was the point. So you should be careful with this pushing too far some relativism. Particularism, yes, but not relativism about human conditions.
Okay. There's only one thing if you I will consider about the spiritual suffering. We should say dukkha more than suffering, because suffering maybe is too narrow. But now there's a tendency, so there's technique and they already sell so-called sensory substitution. So it may not, there are many cases you can search on the internet, now it's very popular and they can sell it. So what does it mean to say? It's very funny. When blind people or deaf people, normally we have to cure their eyes or ears in order to make it normal function. But instead of that, they sell a jacket with several electronics on that jacket. And they have a patient of that one. And that patient replaced for the visual things. And they don't have to fix their eyes, the patient eyes, they just wear it. And after several months learning, and they had in their own mind, in the brain, because they take the image of the MRI scan or so. And they have a visual by using sensory based on your touch. So what do you mean the make sense of things or pursue anything that's a meaning. So the meaning is only in our minds also. We just predict and then we check it, prediction and check. So and then we out in our minds have a vision, special vision by sensory, the third sensor. Very fun. So maybe it can suggest something for you. I will study about your sensation more because the book and the idea that you said I do not read. So maybe I will read more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Maybe for Professor Johnson and Dura and Zotula?
Because I have a curiosity. What will happen with transhumanism in 30 years, in your opinion? You are scientific, yeah, you come from natural science. And technology is a very, urgent, quick development. What will happen, for example, in 30 years? What do you think? No, seriously, because yeah,
I'm not an oracle. Anyway, I present in my presentation. I have three categories that can follow. The first one is genetic thing. That today I only focus on genetic. But the other two things that maybe just develop well in future. The second thing is we say we call it the brain control. I don't know, but I just know that it's not maybe not so good word. But what does it mean that? Okay, for now we control everything by first thing we use our sense to our brain, and then from our brain control our muscle, and then our muscle to the world. But if we directly import the information not through our senses and directly to our brain, like as you say, the electronic. Maybe it said is like the movie Matrix, automatically to our brain, and from our brain, I don't need to use my muscle, and it go out immediately by reading my thinking, and it go out to the machine. So maybe it's in the future. Another one is even it's not related to our body, but AI is very important. Yeah, I can say AI now is around.
yeah.
When, for example, I am an investor, I want to buy a land, for example. And then I think, okay, this is a beautiful. But when I check my AI on my telephone, but it's been show me in history of 10 years I use that iPhone. Oh, you like high building, you like etc. So it's not what you want, it's because it's just emotion at that time, particular moments you like it. But in history of my life, because they take a very long statistic, 10 years, they understand me more than I understand myself. So it is one of the examples that maybe they can better understand. They understand me more than I understand myself. Because they have evidence, they have a lot of information. So maybe I think that AI in future will be very important for us. I myself, I have a group. Okay, I have a group. Okay, I'm doing physics, nanotechnology. So I work with another guy who work in AI. And let me design for me a materials that can have a very strong reflection light. That I work in energy and material science at the same time. And I normally, when I think, okay, I have to calculate which one, and the light comes and the light out, and they cancel out each other or something. Okay, it's what I'm thinking, logically thinking. But when I give it to AI, okay, I don't have time to present what is AI works, but principally I understand it. They give me very strange composition. And when I test it, I try to do it in the lab. This works. Okay, so what interesting point here? okay, I use my knowledge, I use my knowledge that I learned about 50 years in physics, and I don't know how they work there because I just give them the function and the requirement, the outcomes, and they have to do by themselves. But they give me exactly very, very different from what I normally calculate.
Yeah.
But this works. So I can see that now AI will intervene in our life. They already do. And in future, I don't know, maybe in 20 years or 50 years, I don't know, maybe they are the master and we can just work for them. Sorry about that.
Yeah, Professor Hai, I think you're not only a scientist and a Buddhist philosopher, but also a futurist.
No.
Yes. Thank you again for this wonderful discussion. Bojan, thank you for moderating the session and also the discussion. We now have an exciting modification of plans, since we have to end this session now, and we can reconvene at dinner at 6:30 in Atrium in the hotel. 6:30 in the hotel. And I suggest that we take the opportunity of us reconvening there, having good dinner, having a glass of wine together, and we will then have a chance to listen our three last presenters in that setting after dinner. After dinner. And there will be ample discussion, not only on the futurist question of Yondura, what life will look like in 15 or 20 years.
After dinner, after wine, after
No,
wine.
before dinner.
That's Professor Hai has not revealed to us yet, but I think he was going to say that it is wine that opens the mind.
After dinner,
After dinner, it will be a discussion.
Yes, so again, I want to thank you all for your wonderful presentations and the discussion we had. I think it was very interesting for all of us. So 3 more presenters after dinner. We all reconvene 6:30 at Atrium. We have dinner together, and then we have 3 more presenters. Okay, and in between we are free. You can rest a little bit, and please, the Vietnamese delegation. Unfortunately, we have another meeting for you. Okay, so you're not free. Okay,